Hello and welcome to Elementary Brewing. My name is Brian and today we're going to make some beer, so let's get started. Alright, beautiful day for a brew day. Brewing in the afternoon today, so it's actually light outside. Brew day always starts with water. I've got my distilled water there. Got a whole lot of water. I have not been brewing very much lately. We're going to get our kettle filled up here and go ahead and start mashing in. Normally, I fill my kettle the night before because the Anvil Foundry has the delay timer on it. I would just wake up and have my water heated up, but I really didn't know what time I was going to be brewing today, so I went ahead and filled it up. I'm doing a step mash today, so my first mash rest is a protein rest at 122 degrees. Wasn't too worried about it taking too long to heat up. So flip on the kettle there, set it up to 122. And then I'm going to go get my grains, crush my grains, and then get my water salts. So, what are we brewing today, Brian? We are brewing a Dunkelweizen. Went ahead and ordered this kit from Northern Brewer. Big shout out to Northern Brewer for supplying me with everything I needed for today's brew day. Alright, so we're going to grab our grain mill and get these grains crushed up. Alright, and that grain mill is dusty, but it's all set and ready to go. Let's go grab our drill and let's get these grains crushed. I've got my grain mill set to crush it pretty fine, which for brewing a bag or for the ClawHammer basket, you can really finely crush it. But today I am brewing on the Anvil Foundry, and I think, as you're going to see a little bit later in the video, that it might have been a little bit helpful to maybe not crush this as finely this time. Of course, there's always something that goes wrong on brew day. Battery ran out. Let's go replace that battery and continue milling the grains. All right, now that my grains are crushed up, I'm going to go set them off to the side, and I'm going to get my water salts ready. My water was still not heated up at this point, so I still got plenty of time to get these salts measured out and added. For this batch, I'm going to be adding calcium chloride, canning salt, gypsum, and magnesium sulfate, which is basically just good old-fashioned Epsom salt. So I got my little cups here. Start weighing everything out, get it put off to the side, and then get them in the water. All right, just add them in the water, give them a good stir. I did use the Dunkelweizen style in Brewfather for my water salts, but as you'll find out a little bit later in this video, things were a little off, so I'm not going to post this one in the description. If you do want to brew it, head on over to Northern Brewer and order the kit and then plug everything into Brewfather for your system. All right, check this out. We got the new Anvil Foundry XP brew pump, which I gotta say I've used it a few times. Absolutely love it. It is absolutely the most quiet pump I've ever used. And here I am struggling with the tri-clamp because, well, that's usually what I do. I struggle with tri-clamps. All right, so let's finish hooking up all these hoses and everything. Gonna go ahead and grab one of these little clampery doos to add onto the bottom of the Anvil Foundry there. My mash water is almost heated up, so I'm going to go ahead and turn on my pump, get everything recirculating. And now my water is going to be heated up, and it is going to be time to mash in. So here we go. Let's start mashing. And right about here, as you're going to see, this is where things started to go a little bit south for me. I was trying to do a 5-gallon batch in the Anvil Foundry 6.5. There was 10 pounds of grains. I had 4.68 gallons of water inside of the kettle. And as you're going to see here in a second, the grains were way up to the top. Things were not flowing through the bottom very well. It was filled up way too much. There were some grains that were starting to spill over. This is the point where I was like looking around going like, I'm starting to get a little bit worried. This was not a good idea. Probably should have done this in a larger system, or maybe just scaled back the recipe or something. In the long run, I think everything's going to work out okay, but as you can see, I am really starting to stir gently. I'm looking around going like, there is way too much in here. I still have more to put in. Like I'm thinking, what am I going to do? Things are spilling over the side. So what I ended up doing was I went and grabbed a bucket and I pumped some of the liquid out already to give myself a little bit more room, but still super thick mash. I definitely needed to use rice holes. It was not draining. It was not flowing. I'm going to pump out some of that wort, which I really didn't want to do. I guess I could have held on to it for later, but I didn't. So I was able to get all of my grains in there, but it did end up affecting my efficiencies. Yeah, I mean, look at the grains are spilling over. The water's up at the top. The grains are up at the top. I definitely had some issues. Like I said, my mash efficiency ended up being like a 42% mash efficiency, which is like probably one of the worst mash efficiencies I've ever got. My brew house efficiency ended up being like 47%. I ended up only racking 3.5 gallons into a fermenter. I was hoping to rack 5 to 5.5 gallons. At the end of the day, I did hit my numbers because I scaled back the size. But anyway, it was a rough brew day. So I did try to recirculate my mash, but because I had kind of a stuck mash, things weren't recirculating well. I did pull a reading there for a pH reading. Brewfather was recommending that I add 4 milliliters of lactic acid, but as you'll see, I was at 5.3 pH, which is absolutely perfect. So I did not add any lactic acid. Say hi to Mrs. Elementary Brewing there. My 15-minute mash rest was done. For the protein rest, I ramped it up to 148, did a 30-minute rest at 148. Then I ramped it up to 158, did another 30-minute rest there, getting some of my new toys ready for a gravity reading. I'll explain those in a bit. You can see my mash was not draining at all, so I ended up taking the lid off there. Do a little clean as we go. I then started to pull my grains, which were much heavier and much more stuck than I was expecting. So I did try to stir it up, get a little bit more flowage in there, but it did not really work. I ended up pulling the basket. I did even try to do a little bit of a cold sparge, but it was just really not flowing. This was my first kind of official stuck mash, which, let me tell you, they're not fun. So I did pull my grains and started heating up my kettle to get ready for the boil. Tried to push as much as I could through. Just not fun. It was a little bit stressful. So I tried everything I possibly could to get as much sugar out of these grains as I possibly could. But in the end, I was not able to get enough to do a full 5-gallon batch. So started the boil here. Thankfully, the boil was pretty easy on this one. I just boiled for 60 minutes. I had one hop addition at 60 minutes. The rest of the boil was largely uneventful. So there go the hops in the kettle. I did end up chilling this one down with the immersion chiller that comes with the Anvil Foundry. I'm not exactly sure why I decided not to use the Xchillerator. I think it was just because I didn't want to do any more cleanup. But the immersion chiller in the Foundry, it knocked it down to I ended up getting it to about 122 degrees after 10 minutes. And I said, you know what, this is really starting to go way too slow for me. I was done with this brew day. I was ready for it to be over. So I racked 122 degree wort into my stainless steel fermenter, threw it in my chest freezer, and figured it would be brought down to pitching temp overnight, and I would just pitch my yeast the next morning. But it was at this point I looked around and realized that my brew day was far from over because I still had to clean up. Oh, fun. And I also remembered that I did not get a final gravity or a starting gravity reading, but that's not a problem when you have the Anton Par Easy Dens. Ended up running it through, realized that I hit a 1.051 starting gravity, which is exactly what the starting gravity was supposed to be on this beer. I was just supposed to have 5.5 gallons instead of the 3.5 gallons that I got. But at the end of the day, 3.5 gallons is way better than no gallons of beer. And so I woke up in the morning the next morning and my wort was at My wort was at 70 degrees. So I ran to the fridge, grabbed 1 pack of Imperial Yeast's G01 Stefan. I have never used this strain before. I have never used this particular yeast before, but I was really looking forward to getting some of those banana and clove esters and phenols in this dark wheat beer. So gave it a little shake, 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 a little sanitize. I did not make a starter with this one. I only have 3.5 gallons of beer, so I did not need a starter or anything like that. Make sure everything's nice and sanitized. And then dump this in the fermenter. Really looking forward to having a dark wheat beer on tap with those banana and clove flavors. Sounds delicious. Then we're going to go ahead and slap an airlock on this puppy and get this thing fermenting. Fermentation went by without any issues. The only real issue that I guess I had was I was expecting a 10-12 final gravity. Could not get this one lower than 10-16, so I'm not sure if this yeast just has a tendency to maybe stall out a little bit. Final gravity ended up being about a 10-16. I was getting a couple different measurements, but 10-16 seemed to be the one that I was getting most frequently. So I went ahead and said, you know what, after a few days of that it must be done. Went ahead and sanitized all my transfer equipment and got this thing going into a keg to carbonate. So I had already purged my keg. I did end up just throwing this one in through the top and then repurged it when I was done. Not really too worried about oxidation in this beer anyway. There was not a ton of hops in it, so went ahead, just transferred it into my keg, sealed it up, took it over to the fridge and carbonated it at about 14 psi for about a week. And then after that, I had a delicious Dunkelweizen. So it's pouring like a caramel brown color, definitely not clear because of the wheat malt, and it has a nice, thick, rich, off-white head, and it's tasting absolutely wonderful. I get hints of banana and clove in there, which is exactly what I wanted, and it's drinking very easy, coming in at about 4.2% ABV. I highly recommend picking up this kit from Northern Brewer and brewing it for yourself. Cheers, thanks for watching, and have a great rest of your day.